Two former British soldiers face prosecution for the murder of an IRA man more than 40 years ago. Joe McCann was shot dead near his home in Belfast in 1972. The soldiers, now in their 60s, say they're appalled.
I'm afraid it's fundamentally wrong. These people have served and provided us with the security that we enjoy in a particularly difficult time in Northern Ireland's history.
Also tonight, riot police dispatched as inmates seize control of a prison in Birmingham.
The evacuation of Aleppo falters. Thousands are still trapped in the Syrian city.
Travel chaos at Christmas. More workers take industrial action.
And not pie in the sky, but a British triumph, a meat and potato pie in space.
This is the ITV Evening News with Alistair Stewart and Charlene White.
Good evening. The barely healed wounds of the Troubles were torn open today, with two former paratroopers accused of murdering a prominent IRA member almost 45 years ago. Joe McCann was unarmed when he was shot dead by British soldiers in Belfast in 1972, during one of the bloodiest years of the conflict.
No one was ever charged, but now Northern Ireland prosecutors have opened proceedings against the soldiers who are aged 67 and 65. Tonight, their solicitors said the men are appalled by the decision, and some MPs have branded it a witch hunt. From Belfast, Ben Chapman reports.
It was the bloodiest year in the history of Northern Ireland's Troubles, with daily battles between paramilitaries and British Army soldiers. But the death of Joe McCann in 1972, a prominent member of the IRA, remains as controversial as it was then. He was shot several times by a British Army patrol, and now, for the first time, two soldiers face prosecution accused of his murder.
This is a welcome chink in the armour of impunity that has really lain over the military for so many years. I think people need to be reminded that just because you're wearing a uniform, you're not allowed to murder people.
Prosecutions are to be brought against two former servicemen who've been named only as Soldier A and Soldier C. They're now aged 67 and 65. A third member of the Parachute Regiment patrol that day has since died. Welcoming the prosecution, Joe McCann's son Fergal said he was unarmed when he was shot. This was one of the first shoot-to-kill incidents, in our opinion. Joe McCann's death here 4 decades ago is just one of around 300 caused by the British Army during the Troubles that are now being reinvestigated. For some, that represents justice at last. For others, it's a damaging witch hunt. Prosecutors are also considering whether to charge soldiers involved in the bloody Sunday shootings when 13 demonstrators were shot dead, and there could yet be more prosecutions.
I'm afraid it's fundamentally wrong. These people have served and provided us with the security that we enjoy in a particularly difficult time in Northern Ireland's history, and I just cannot feel that this is right.
In a statement, solicitors for soldiers A and C said they're outraged and appalled by today's decision. This is no way to treat those who we ask to undertake the most difficult of tasks and who are often very young. More than 40 years since Joe McCann was buried and nearly 20 since the Troubles ended. It remains much harder to lay to rest the questions surrounding his death and hundreds of others.
Ben Chapman reporting there. Hundreds of prisoners are rioting tonight at a privately run jail in Birmingham. Trouble erupted this morning and quickly spread, forcing guards to abandon 4 of the wings. At least one inmate is said to have been badly injured, and photos, thought to be from inside, show inmates in officers' uniforms with their keys. Well, Angus Walker is outside the jail for us tonight. Angus, what's the situation now?
In the last few minutes, police wearing riot gear have just pulled up in vans outside the main entrance here of the prison. This is an incident which escalated quickly from this morning into 400 prisoners getting control of 4 wings of this large prison. We gather it started when the keys were taken off one prison guard. Later this afternoon, we saw smoke rising from inside the prison and the sound of fireworks, firecrackers from inside as well. Also, pictures have been posted on social media appearing to be selfies taken by prisoners inside wearing riot gear which they'd taken from stores. Also pictures posted claiming to be evidence of the destruction that has been carried out inside those wings being taken by prisoners. Earlier I just spoke to one man who says that he's been in contact with his brother inside the prison on a smuggled mobile phone, and this is what he had to say.
There's fires burning all outside on the wings. People are saying papers and anything that's burnable outside on the landings on fire. They've had to smash their windows so they can get fresh air in, and there's bars all across the windows and they're trying to smash the bars out. It says they've been on lockdown all day, no food or nothing, and this is basically there's not enough staff. They've been locked up for most of the last week.
Now, the Ministry of Justice say the situation is contained and that the prisoners involved in this riot, in this disturbance, face having their sentences lengthened. The police have also surrounded the entire perimeter of the prison here in Birmingham, and they say there is absolutely no threat to the general public. Relatives of prisoners inside, including those on wings which have not been affected, have been gathering outside. There's been a sense of frustration from them that they're not getting enough information from the authorities about their relatives who are locked up in their cells, they say. And also the Prison Officers Association says that all their members, all prison officers, have been accounted for.
OK, Angus, thanks very much.
To Syria, and the attempt to evacuate the last women and children from the ruins of Aleppo collapsed today. A convoy was forced to turn back to the rebel areas as the fragile trust between the two sides suddenly broke down.
Tonight, Russia claimed the evacuation of civilians was complete, but the rebels said fighters were still trapped inside. Our correspondent Dan Rivers is in Aleppo and from there sent this report.
Less than 24 hours after it started, the evacuation turned into a scramble for safety. Mortars had been fired and Red Crescent vehicles were forced to abandon the rescue of tens of thousands of civilians.
Well, as you can see, the buses and the Red Crescent vehicles are pulling out. We're hearing the sounds of mortars. There's a lot of chaos here, but what's clear is that there has been a breakdown of this ceasefire.
Within minutes, Syrian soldiers were reinforcing the front line as an armoured vehicle ventured further towards rebel territory. After an hour, the breakdown in trust was total, trucks dumping rubble to seal the escape route. A convoy which had already left was forced to turn around, women and children waiting in the biting cold as negotiations failed. As this played out, we caught a rare glimpse of one of Syria's allies, Hezbollah soldiers from Lebanon arriving to bolster the defences along this key road. And then the final confirmation the plan to rescue civilians was failing, the convoy driving back into the ravaged enclave they'd only just left. For those on board, it must have been as confusing as it was terrifying.
These are the civilians that are coming back from the crossing points from the passage after it was closed.
And where it was closed, officers were already consolidating their grip on the last checkpoint, leaving those looking on in no doubt which way the wind is blowing now. Any vestige of the rebels is rapidly being expunged, a revolution that has burnt out here in Aleppo, leaving behind a legacy that horrifies many ordinary people.
It really breaks my heart to see the city like this, the old city like this.
Do you think people in Aleppo can forgive each other on each side of the front line?
Of course, because if we couldn't, we wouldn't have stayed here. Of course we can. Of course, like the people are strong.
The ceasefire may have broken down for now, but there's no reversing President Assad's victory here. A position of strength which seems unassailable, but one which has been achieved at the cost of this city's people and heritage.
Dan, how significant a setback is this?
There was always a risk that this was going to happen. It's such a fragile, precarious process that was in place. It's just civilians being evacuated from East Aleppo. A similar operation in reverse is happening in rebel-held territory a few miles to the west, where pro-Assad civilians are also being taken out in a sort of swap, if you like. And because of the complexity of that, and the enormous amount of enmity and hate on both sides, there was always a chance that things would break down, as we saw they did today. On the positive side, despite those initial mortars, we haven't heard much in the way of fire throughout the day. It hasn't descended back into the kind of awful violence that we've seen for the past 4.5 years. One other interesting thing about that convoy that ended up having to go back in, that you saw in my report, we understand from some reports that those 47 orphans that we thought had got out were in fact on that last convoy and are now back inside East Aleppo.
Dan Rivers live on a difficult link in Aleppo. Thank you.
A strain of bird flu has been found at a turkey farm in Louth in Lincolnshire. It's the same strain of virus that's affected mainland Europe and parts of Asia, leading to the culling of hundreds of thousands of birds. The government says a protection zone is now in place and it won't have an impact on the supply of turkeys and birds over Christmas.
And the chair of the National Child Sex Abuse Inquiry has announced that she will publish an interim report in 2018. Professor Alexis Jay also said that she hopes that she'll have made significant progress by 2020.
A 101-year-old man became Britain's oldest convicted criminal today and was warned he faces a long prison sentence. Ralph Clark carried out a string of sex offences against 2 young girls and a young boy in the 1970s and 80s.
One of his victims spoke after a jury found him guilty today and said he deserved to rot in hell and should die behind bars. Rebecca Barry has more.
He was born in 1915. Has lived through 2 world wars, and for decades, Ralph Clark probably thought he'd got away with his crimes. Until today, at 101 years old, he became Britain's oldest convict, guilty of a string of historical child sex offences.
He's evil, and he deserves to be in prison. He deserves to die in prison. He deserves to rot in hell for what he's put me through. I think we can all say that unanimously.
Ralph Clark was found guilty of 21 counts of abuse against 2 girls in the 1970s and 80s. He also admitted 9 offences against a young boy. Speaking slowly for the benefit of the elderly defendant, the judge said, "The sentence I'm looking at the moment is in double figures. The reality is he is so old, it will be amazing if he's released back into the community."
It's never too late. This is certainly the oldest offences that I've investigated, and this just goes to show you that if you want to come to the police and you want us to prosecute somebody, we will take your evidence and we will prosecute.
The court heard 2 of his victims eventually went to the police when he turned 100, and everybody was saying what a good life he'd led.
People like him should never come out. Never come out.
We've been in our own prison for the last 40 years.
And he's lived his life. And as you can see by his arrogance, he hasn't been affected these last 40 years, we have.
Ralph Clark will turn 102 in March. He'll find out the length of his sentence on Monday, but will, inevitably, die behind bars. Rebecca Barry, ITV News.
Still to come on the ITV Evening News, more Christmas disruption for anyone planning to travel by train or plane next week.
And the pie's the limit. Get it? Why this tasty treat ended up in space. These stories and more after the break. Welcome back. There was more bad news today for anyone hoping to fly off on a Christmas getaway. Check-in staff, baggage handlers and cargo crew at 18 airports are to strike next week. And Virgin pilots also said they were taking industrial action. Well, Sally Lockwood is here to talk through this. So, Sally, anyone planning on travelling next week could be in for quite a tough time.
Yes, that's right, Charlene. I mean, trying to get away over Christmas can be stressful enough, but these further strike announcements today are really adding to that concern. This industrial action announced by the Virgin Atlantic pilots will begin on the 23rd of December. From that point, they've said they'll be working strictly to contract. The Professional Pilots Union explained that from the 23rd, from that date, pilot goodwill will be removed, which could mean some flights not being covered. Now, on top of that, there's been the announcement from the Unite union over pay, which will involve more than 1,500 baggage handlers and cargo crew across 18 airports. They will go on strike for 48 hours from the same date, the 23rd of December. And of course, earlier this week, about 2,000 British Airways cabin crew also voted for strikes in their dispute over pay, though it's not yet confirmed when that will take place. And then on top of that, there's the rail disruption that we have already. More Southern Rail strikes planned for both before and after Christmas. We've seen the chaos and misery that can be caused by travel disruption at this time of year, and these strikes really add to that concern. Some are already calling this the Christmas of discontent, and it certainly looks like it will be for passengers.
All right, Sally, thanks very much. Well, to find out more about whether your travel plans could be disrupted by industrial action, then we'll have all the details on our website. Just go to itv.com/news.
A Royal Marine serving life for murdering a wounded Taliban fighter will have to wait until next week to know if he'll be home in time for Christmas. Sergeant Alexander Blackman was hoping judges would release him on bail today, ahead of a full appeal hearing next year. The Marine and his supporters must now wait until Wednesday for a decision.
Police in Scotland are searching for a woman who was reported missing 6 weeks ago. 38-year-old Margaret Fleming from Inverkip has learning difficulties and lives with her 2 carers. They are said to be the only people who have seen her in 17 years.
And National Lottery operator Camelot's been fined £3 million for allowing the owner of a deliberately damaged ticket to win £2.5 million. The gambling watchdog said that the ticket, which was claimed in 2009, was highly likely to have been fraudulent.
Hillary Clinton has accused President Putin of attacking the United States with cyber attacks that fatally damaged her campaign for the White House. She said a series of hacks were the result of Putin's personal beef against her.
Well, it followed President Obama's promise to retaliate against Russia, as our Washington correspondent Robert Moore reports.
With just 34 days left in office, President Obama has one more fateful decision to make: whether to engage in covert cyber warfare against Russia. Vladimir Putin is currently in Japan, here watching a demonstration of his favourite sport, judo. But he stands accused of engaging in an activity far more covert and sinister. The CIA believes Putin personally authorised the hacking of the Democratic Party's computer system and then ordered the leaking of the information. The White House is acknowledging it must react to this attack on American democracy.
When any foreign government tries to impact the integrity of our elections, that we need to take action. We will, at a time and place of our own choosing.
His decision is made politically fraught because Donald Trump has been consistently dismissive of the intelligence.
Anything that goes wrong, they blame Russia. Russia did it. They have no idea.
Personally, it could be Russia. I don't really think it is.
Trump appears to believe that claims of Russian hacking is an effort by Democrats to question the legitimacy of his victory.
Tell me when you're ready.
It has now led to a rupture in the previously respectful transition underway. The White House spokesman reminding Americans that Trump appeared to even approve of a Russian hack of Hillary Clinton's computers.
The Republican nominee for president was encouraging Russia to hack his opponent.
This foolish guy, Josh Earnest, I don't know if he's talking to President Obama. You know, having the right press secretary is so important because he is so bad the way he delivers a message.
And now Hillary Clinton has joined the angry post-mortem, saying the Russian hack contributed to her election loss. And she is calling the Kremlin's action an attack on America. Robert Moore, ITV News, Washington.
And finally tonight, the meat and potato pie that's boldly gone where none has gone before. We do love the story. To mark Wigan's esteemed World Pie Eating Championship, a pastry was sent high above the Earth's crust.
3, 2, 1.
It was attached to a weather balloon and managed to travel 29 miles towards space.
After a couple of hours in flight, it made a graceful descent, although experts said that it didn't appear to reheat on re-entry. No comment yet from the Cornish about putting a pasty up there.
Oh, goodness me, definitely a favourite today. OK, that's it for now. We'll be back with more on News at 10.
But from the team, a very good evening to you. Good night.
Goodbye.